Bill Maher just sat down with MSNBC's Chris Hayes and did what he does best: cut through the political spin and call it exactly how he sees it. No sugarcoating, no tiptoeing around the issue. He went straight for the jugular, breaking down why so many voters are tuning out the left's messaging. And honestly, it's the kind of wake-up call they probably don't want to hear. But here's where it gets interesting. Maher isn't some conservative firebrand taking cheap shots. He actually wants the left to get it together, which is why he's calling them out. And when Hayes tried to push back, you could practically feel the discomfort in the room. So, is the left completely missing what everyday Americans actually care about? Is the media just adding fuel to the fire? And with 2024 creeping up fast, does any of this even change the game? One thing's for sure, this debate wasn't just another cable news chat, it was brutal.
I think that I don't think there's anyone who hasn't had a moment across the political spectrum of some form of progressive communication that's either left them bewildered or a little like, I don't know about that. But I also think at the same time, there is a message of what I would call like common sense, patriotic pluralism. Yeah. That is a majority message, which is like, if some father and mother have health care for their kid lined up who's trans, just stay the fuck out of their business. Let them make that decision. That's their decision to make. And you don't have to make.
Bill Maher isn't exactly known for holding his tongue, and this time was no different. He went straight for the jugular, calling out what he sees as blatant media bias and a growing disconnect from reality. Sitting across from MSNBC's Chris Hayes, Maher didn't just poke holes in the mainstream narrative, he tore it wide open. The conversation got heated fast, especially when Maher started dissecting the left's messaging and how it's turning off everyday American. He didn't shy away from the so-called woke agenda either, pointing out how the media spin is only making things worse. Chris Hayes did his best to push back, but you could tell he was struggling to counter Maher's points. It wasn't just a debate, it felt like Maher was delivering a much-needed reality check, and Hayes was left grasping for a comeback.
Ken Martin guy, he said something I've heard Democrats say a lot: we didn't get our message out. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, but
yeah.
And I've said this before to Democrats: no, you did. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You did get your message out, and people don't like the.
Maher didn't dance around the issue, he went straight for it. No filter, no fluff. In classic Maher fashion, he cut through the usual political double talk and laid it out plain and simple. The left's problem isn't just how they're delivering their message, it's what they're actually saying. And he didn't just tiptoe around it, he flat out called out the disconnect, making it clear that voters aren't rejecting the message because they don't hear it enough. They're rejecting it because it's not resonating. It was one of those moments where you could almost hear the mainstream media squirming.
Comparing it to what Elon Musk is spewing out, unfortunately, on X, you sound like Brett Stevens right now, with all due respect. It's a joke. That's a real time.
And you sound like him, who looks like Rachel Maddow. Ken Martin guy, he said something I've heard Democrats say a lot: we didn't get our message out. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, but yeah. And I've said this before to Democrats: no, you did. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You did get your message out, and people don't like the message.
But it was Axios that they gave the new media seat to, and that is to Mike Allen, who is like an established reporter in Washington. Axios has been around for like 5 years, sold for $500 million. I don't really consider it new media, and I thought it was interesting that was their first new media.
It is new media, because old media sells for $1.
That is.
Maher said out loud what a lot of people have been thinking for a while, many. Leftist policies just don't line up with the real lives of everyday American. And he wasn't talking about some messaging mishap or a PR problem. No, he went deeper, arguing that the issue isn't just how these policies are being presented, it's that they often feel completely out of touch with what average voters actually care about. It was one of those moments where you could almost hear the frustration in his voice. He wasn't just criticizing the strategy, he was pointing out a much bigger problem, one that the left doesn't seem to want to acknowledge.
I think there's sort of two different imperatives that are in a little bit of tension with each other. So one, I think there's an imperative right now for the party to stand up against the most destructive things that Musk and Trump are doing. And I think they're doing some genuinely destructive things. I mean, there's people walking around the world right now with like devices inside their bodies from clinical trials sponsored by USAID that they can't get out. The guards that were guarding ISIS prisoners in Syria were paid on USAID salaries that got cut off. There's a 25-year-old mucking around the code base of the Treasury system. So there's things they have to do to try to oppose. But it's also the case that like all of the reflection that happened after losing that election and trying to figure about how do you win back people you lost was real and true. And I guess my feeling is you got to fight, you got to try different things, and you have to be authentic. You can't like reverse engineer any of this off a blueprint. And I really think this is true about politics. Steve Jobs once said, it's not the customer's job to know what they want. Like, it's our job. And you couldn't have reverse engineered Barack Obama off of George W. Bush. And you couldn't have reverse engineered Donald Trump off of Barack Obama. What happens in the end of an election is everyone sifts through the data and they come up with their perfect, their plan based on, well, this worked and with this group and we got attack here and there. And what politics about is a certain point is like innovation and communication. You got to come up with new stories.
Maher didn't just call out bad messaging, he took it a step further. He raised the big question, is this really just a communication problem or is there something deeper going on? Because if voters keep tuning out, maybe it's not about how the message is delivered, maybe it's about what's actually being said. He suggested that the real issue isn't just a failure to explain policies better, it's that the policies themselves might not be lining up with what everyday Americans actually care about. And that's a tough pill to swallow. If voters keep rejecting the platform, at what point does the left stop blaming misinformation and start rethinking their entire approach?
I mean, is whether the child should make the decision.
But the child is never making the decision. The parents are always making the decision. Parents consent to medical care.
Well, here in California, you're allowed to hide it from the parents if the kid it's...
Yes.
Thank you, one person who knows that.
But I mean...
Somebody knows that.
If you're tired of the usual political fluff and actually want some straight talk, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Seriously, I'll wait. All right, you're in? Perfect. Now let's dive into this fiery exchange between Bill Maher and Chris Hayes. This wasn't just two guys arguing for the sake of it, this was a real unfiltered discussion about a major problem the left keeps running into. Maher came out swinging, calling out what he sees as the biggest flaw in Democratic messaging, and let's just say, he did not sugarcoat it.
The rubber meets the road, because this is important. He wanted to, this week, he's suing the 12-member commission, the California Coastal Commission. He launches his rockets from Vandenberg Space Force Base. We used to call it Air Force Base, but I guess now we're into Space Force time. He wanted the proposal to expand the number of launches. Okay, again, one of the most impressive companies, an American company. He wants a little more, give it to him. No. The commission, some bureaucrat, said nope, and this is the reason why. Commissioner Carol Hart saying, we're dealing with a company, the head of which has aggressively injected himself into the presidential race and made it clear what his point of view is. Yes, because he lives in America, and he can do that.
Maher wasted no time getting to the heart of the issue. In his view, the problem isn't a lack of exposure. Democrats have made their message loud and clear. The real problem? Voters heard it, and a lot of them just weren't on board. He wasn't buying the idea that the left simply needs a bigger megaphone. Instead, he argued that they need to rethink what they're saying and how it connects with regular people. He called on Democrats to stop overcomplicating things and actually focus on the everyday struggles of voters. Chris Hayes, however, pushed back. He believed the priority should be countering figures like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, who he sees as dangerous influences. But Maher wasn't convinced. Do voters really care more about Musk's tweets than their grocery bills? He wasn't so sure.
The Trump White House admitting more influencers and podcasters, into the press corps. Yeah, the press room is different. I mean, it reflects America.
I think it's great.
Yeah, you do.
But it's mostly right-wing influencers and podcasters, obviously, but I think it's a good step. I mean, this is how people are getting their news.
It is. I mean, how can you deny it?
I was actually over there the other day, and it's packed in there. And I think even all the reporters, whether you're Legacy or the podcasting people, they're all happy. And then they have like the one rotating chair, which I guess is pretty cool. So there's always like somebody new that comes in.
So this is you're at the White House, you're talking about?
Yeah.
But it was Axios that they gave the new media seat to, and that is to Mike Allen, who is like an established reporter in Washington. Axios has been around for like 5 years, sold for $500 million. I don't really consider it new media, and I thought it was interesting that was their first new media.
It is new media because old media sells for $1.
That is true.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that's what Bezos bought the Washington Post for. He bought it for like $1.
Hayes tried to make the case that while Musk might stir up controversy, it's Trump's influence that poses the real danger, but Maher wasn't buying it. He challenged the idea that this was what actually mattered most to everyday Americans. For Maher, the issue wasn't just the Democrats messaging it was their authenticity. He pointed out that when voters reject a message, the solution isn't to just repeat it louder. It's to stop, rethink, and actually figure out why it's not connecting. Doubling down on a losing strategy? That's a fast track to disaster. To drive his point home, Maher brought up Steve Jobs' famous idea that customers don't always know what they want until it's shown to them. But here's the thing, politics isn't tech. You can't just tell voters what they should care about. If policies don't feel like they're improving lives, people will tune out. Maher's message was simple. If Democrats want to win, they need to listen more and lecture less. Then things got even more intense. The conversation shifted to one of the most controversial issues out there: parental rights in education. Hayes argued that Democrats should take the lead in defending parents' rights, particularly when it comes to gender-affirming healthcare for trans youth. But Maher wasn't convinced. He saw a deeper issue at play that could drive voters even further away. Hayes framed it as a matter of choice, saying parents should have the final say in what's best for their kids. But Maher pushed back, highlighting a major concern among critics. What happens when schools make life-changing decisions without even informing parents? That's when things really got heated. Maher didn't hold back, arguing that the left isn't just losing voters with vague policies, it's alienating them with what many see as outright overreach. There's a fine line between protecting children's rights and cutting parents out of the equation. And according to Maher, Democrats aren't just crossing that line, they're sprinting past it. Maher didn't hold back when taking on the legacy media. He accused major outlets of doing more than just misrepresenting the facts she claimed. They were actively crafting narratives that push voters further from reality. In his view, mainstream media isn't merely failing the public, it's fueling the very communication crisis that has plagued the Democratic Party. But Maher didn't stop there. He pointed out a major shift in how people consume political content. While traditional networks rely on outdated tactics, independent platforms are rising fast, offering raw and unfiltered conversation. Podcasts, alternative media, and digital-first voices are capturing the attention of an audience that craves authenticity over scripted debates. His takeaway? People are done with rehearsed messaging. The demand for real, unscripted discussions is growing, and if Democrats don't adjust, they'll find themselves struggling to connect with voters in ways that truly matter. So where do you stand? Is Maher right in calling out these issues, or is this just another controversial moment in media? Share your thoughts below. And if you're enjoying this discussion, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates. At its core, Maher's argument is simple. If Democrats want to win back trust, they need to engage with voters in an honest and direct way. Ignoring the concerns of everyday Americans isn't a winning strategy, it's a guaranteed path to further losses. Change is inevitable in politics. Those who refuse to evolve will struggle to stay relevant. Do you think Maher is onto something, or is this just another high-profile debate? Let us know your thoughts, and if you appreciate straight-shooting analysis, subscribe now for more no-nonsense discussions.